It is an ordinary evening and supper is done. You stand at the sink with a plate in your hand and you scrape the last of a good supper into the pail. A spoonful of potato, a rind of ham, the soft end of a squash nobody wanted. Then you tip the skillet in the bacon grease, slides off down the drain in a warm ribbon. You sweep the apple peels and the cores off the cutting board and into the pail after it. You find the dry heel of a loaf gone hard on the counter, and that goes in too. You wash your hands, you turn down the lamp, and you think nothing more of it. You should think of it because you just poured money into a bucket. The EPA put out a report in 2025 on what food waste costs American families. It comes to about $14 for each person every week. For a family of 4, that is $56 week after week, scraped into the pail and carried out. Let me be honest with you about the number on this video. The $40 in the title is my plain editorial hook, not a figure any report printed. The source numbers are $14 a person, $56 for a household of 4, but the pail does not care which number you believe. It leaks either way. Here's the hard part to sit with. The better outcome was already in the pail. The bacon grease was cooking fat for a month of mornings. Those apple cores and peels were a jar of vinegar waiting to happen. The vegetable trimmings were the start of a good stock. The bread heel was a pudding for Sunday. Every one of those things was one small step from being food again, and nobody set a lid on any of it. It all went out together in the same bucket, mixed and gone. Now let me say the thing you need to hear before anything else. This is not carelessness. This is not you being wasteful or lazy or bad with $1. No one ever stood beside you in a kitchen and showed you how the plain households turn every scrap back into food. It was never taught to you. So of course it went out with the trash. You did exactly what you were shown, which was nothing. A person cannot save what she was never told had worth. And it does have worth because somebody else is already collecting it. Let me tell you what is happening right now, not far from where I live. There are restaurants in central Pennsylvania that no longer throw their vegetable trimmings away. The carrot tops, the celery ends, the peelings and stems get gathered up and carried out to Amish poultry farms. There's a company called Green Circle, and their flocks run near 15,000 birds a week, raised across 17 Amish farms, fed in part on what those kitchens used to discard. Think on that. Other people's waste is already feeding somebody. It is already being turned back into meat and eggs and a living. It just is not feeding you. That is the whole quiet truth of it. The slop pail in your kitchen is a coin purse with a hole worn in the bottom. You fill it up honest every day, and every day it empties out onto the ground and you never hear the coins drop. The bread heel you brushed off the counter went out the same as a penny flicked off the table. Too small to bend down for, you think. But a penny a day is $1 in 3 months. And $1 a day is real money by winter. The waste is never one big loss you would notice. It is 100 little ones you never do. I have watched families I love do this same thing at their own sinks. Good people, careful people, scraping supper into the pail with no notion that supper number 2 was sitting right there in their hands. It is not their fault, the same as it is not yours. Somewhere along the way, the knowing got dropped. Grandmothers took it with them, and nobody wrote it down. And a whole way of stretching a household got quietly set on the curb. I mean to give it back to you, all of it, one plain skill at a time, the way it was given to me. The grease, the bones, the peels, the cores, the heel of the loaf, every last thing in that pail has a second life, and I am going to show you each one. Before I show you a single one of them, you deserve to know who's talking to you and why I would stake my name on every word of it. Before I show you a single one of them, you deserve to know who is talking to you and why I would stake my name on every word of it. My name is Sadie, and I've stood at the butchering table every November since I was 9 years old. I want to be plain about what that means. I do not do the killing, and I never have. That is the men's work, a 2-day frolic of hard hands and cold mornings. What is mine is the sausage, the seasoning I stir in by feel, the lard kettle that never leaves my watch, and every jar I put up after the work is done. So when I tell you how a hog becomes a full pantry, I am telling you what I have done with my own 2 hands, year upon year. Now I owe you an honest word about that number in the title. $40 a week is my hook, and I will not pretend otherwise. The figure I can stand behind comes from a careful study, and it is $14 a person each week for a house of 4 that climbs near 60. So the 40 is a fair middle for a smaller family, but it is my saying, not a counted fact, and you deserve to know the difference. I will do the same with everything else. I will not put a shelf life on rendered fat that I cannot stand behind, and I will tell you plainly which of these things is truly ours and which the whole frontier shared. That is the only way I know to earn a viewer. Now let me show you the first gift, which is the fat. On butchering day, there is fat trimmed from the hog in great pale sheets, and all winter long, there's bacon grease left in the skillet after breakfast. Most kitchens pour that down the drain. We never do. I set it over low heat and let it render slow, which is only a plain word for driving the water out of it. The fat gives up its moisture in a soft sizzle, and I strain the drippings clear through a cloth until nothing cloudy remains. Then I pour it off into crocks and tins to cool. This one habit supplies my kitchen its cooking fat for the whole year, and I do not buy a jar of oil or a can of shortening from one butchering to the next. Now let me show you the tells you can watch for, because this is a thing you feel and see, not a thing you guess at. The reason the fat keeps is simple. Bacteria need water to grow, and rendering drives that water off. So the finished fat resists spoiling far longer than the raw trim it came from. You can watch it happen with your own eyes. The fat goes from soft and yellow to pale and firm, near as firm as a tallow candle, and the drippings run clear instead of muddy. I carry the covered crock down to the cool cellar and set it on the shelf. All winter I draw on it, meal by meal, a spoonful for the skillet, a scoop for the pie crust. That crock is a bank, and I make a withdrawal every single day. Now let me show you what happens to the bottom of the rendering pot, because even there we leave nothing for the trash. When the fat is poured off, little browned bits are left behind, and we call those cracklings. Those and the last scrapings of fat I cook down with lye into lard soap. It is the same fat that fried my eggs, made over into the bar that scrubs my floor. I keep back a portion as a soft soap jelly too, a spreadable paste I use to grease my baking pans. No wrapper, no waxed paper, no bought spray, just a fingertip of jelly wiped around the tin. So the pig gives us cooking fat and cleaning soap and a greased pan, all from the one kettle. The fat was only the first gift the animal gave us, and the bones were waiting in the pot to give up just as much. The fat was only the first gift the animal gave us, and the bones were waiting in the pot to give up just as much. A ham bone still carries a whole meal on it, tucked down in the marrow, and the bits of meat too stubborn to trim, so I set it in my deepest kettle and cover it with cold water. Then I let it go slow, hardly a bubble breaking, for the better part of a day. Long and low is what coaxes the collagen loose. It breaks down into gelatin, and that is the thing that turns thin water into broth that coats the back of a spoon. You know it is ready by the feel of it between two fingers, a little sticky, a little silky, not watery at all. Now let me show you what that ham broth becomes. This is Schnitz und Knepp, and the words themselves tell you the story. Schnitz are the dried apple slices we put by in the fall, sweet and leathery, and I drop a good handful straight into the simmering broth. They drink it in and swell back soft, giving their sweetness to the ham. Knepp is the old German word Knöpfe, which means buttons, and that is just what the dumplings look like when they rise. I stir up a soft dough, drop it in by the spoonful, and cover the pot tight. In a few minutes, they come bobbing to the top like buttons on a Sunday coat. One bone, a jar of dried apples, a cup of flour, and supper is on the table. Now let me turn to the bread, because a stale loaf is never trash in this kitchen. A dry loaf is only a sponge waiting for something to soak up. The first way is the plainest. I cube the hard bread, set it to simmer in good bouillon, and that is our Pennsylvania Dutch brown soup, warm and filling on a cold night for almost nothing. The second way is sweeter. I tear the bread into a dish and pour over a custard of milk and eggs, and I let it sit until every crumb goes heavy and soft. The eggs are what matter here. As it bakes, the egg proteins set up firm and hold the whole thing together. I bake it 25 minutes in a moderate oven, about 350, the way the Pennsylvania Dutch cookbook of fine old recipes lays it out. Now let me bring you to scrapple, which is the true test of a waste-nothing house. When the men have finished the butchering, there are the least loved pieces left, the head, the shoulder, the liver, and the kidneys. Nothing marketable, nothing anybody would buy, and yet all of it good meat. I simmer those trimmings down until they fall apart. Then I stir cornmeal into that rich broth and cook it slow into a thick mush. You know the mush is thick enough when a spoon stands upright in the middle of the pot and does not lean. I pour it into loaf pans to firm, and later it slices and fries. Scrapple is proof of what a family can do when it will spend days putting every inch of the pig to good use, judging each step by look and smell and feel, not by any clock on the wall. Here is the plain arithmetic of it. From one hog, already raised in your own lot and butchered at home, comes the rendered fat in the crocks, the broth in the kettle, the Schnitz and Knepp, the scrapple in the pans, and even the soap at the wash basin. Set that against a year of skillet meat bought by the pound and broth bought by the box, week after week after week. The money you keep is not in one clever trick. It is in letting nothing walk out to the pail. The bones fed you, the stale loaf fed you, and the humble trimmings fed you best of all. The smokehouse feeds you out of the animal, but the cellar feeds you out of the garden, and the cellar keeps its own strict rules. The smokehouse feeds you out of the animal, but the cellar feeds you out of the garden, and the cellar keeps its own strict rules. Go down the steps with me and you will feel it. A good cellar breathes slow as a sleeping animal, cool and damp and patient. Your potatoes want curing first, 10 to 14 days at 45 to 60 degrees, so the skins toughen. After that, they hold 4 to 6 months at 40 to 45. Your apples keep 2 to 6 months near 32 degrees. Now here is the rule folks forget. You never bed apples and potatoes in the same bin. Apples breathe off a gas that wakes the potatoes and sets them sprouting before their time. Keep them apart, each in its own corner. In your cabbage, hold it 3 to 4 months, but keep it clear, out of the cellar. Its smell creeps into everything near it and taints your apples along the way. Now let me carry you back up to the counter where the peelings pile up. Save your clean peels, your stems, your honest trimmings, never anything moldy, never anything gone slimy, for that turns the whole pot. Simmer them light, 20 to 45 minutes, no longer, or the broth goes bitter on you. That pot replaces every boxed broth you ever bought. But hear me plain on one thing. A stock like this is low in acid. If you mean to jar it for the shelf, it needs a pressure canner that climbs to about 240 degrees. A plain boiling kettle will not make it safe, and I will not tell you otherwise. Then there is the corn cob jelly, and I will tell it to you honest. You boil the stripped cobs about 30 minutes, and the water comes up a soft rose color. You set that with sugar and pectin, and it firms into a mock honey. Folks were doing this across the frontier back to about 1875, out in the Dakotas and Nebraska both. I will not dress it up and claim it as ours alone. Good frugal sense belongs to everybody, and what will not cook down into anything, the last unavoidable bits, those go out to your own hens. The chicken yard is the last link in a closed chain, and it closes clean. Mind you, the law, state, and federal both keeps meat-touched scraps away from hogs, for disease travels that way. That's the very reason the documented scrap programs feed chickens and not pigs. Your hens turn your leavings into eggs, and the circle shuts. So let me ask you something, and truly answer me below. What is the one thing that goes into your pail every single night that you have never once thought to save? Tell me, and I will tell you what we would do with it. Next time, I am taking you out to the November butchering frolic, the whole community gathered in the cold, the lard kettle steaming in the yard, the smokehouse racks filling up rung by rung. That is where all of this begins, and it is your natural next stop after today. Save the small thing tonight, and by spring you will find you are never poor, only wasteful, and that is the easiest kind of poor there is to cure.